Hello everyone, welcome back to episode 3 of the journey to build your own personal brand. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about a couple concepts that are super important to the modern world of collaborative software engineering. We're going to be discussing Git and version control, GitHub and GitHub repositories, as well as how to publish your repository on your website on GitHub Pages. My name is Kurt Emmerich. I'm a software engineer here at Microsoft and an alumni of Vanderbilt University.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Alexander Elgazabal. I'm a software engineer here at Microsoft, and I'm an alumni of Merrimack College. And yeah, maybe we should go pop over to the drawing board and talk a little bit about Git and version control. All right, let's talk about Git. Have you ever opened up a Word document and you see that version history button before? You know how it says if you have the document shared with your friends, it shows all your friends' additions or deletions from the document with the timestamps and when they made the edits? Well, that is called version control. And Git is version control for your computer. It tracks changes in files over time. We can revert back to certain changes, and it's a really powerful tool that we use for building software. And it's important for how we deploy software as well. So let's have an example. Let's say we have a file with some code in it. In our case, let's say we have this file, and it has 3 lines, let's say, to start. Your software file for your website might have more lines, probably has more than 3, I'd imagine. Yeah, and it can be a bunch of files too. It can be a folder, it could be any set of anything on your machine. Let's say you have this file. Let's say you want to make a change to it. You want to add 1 line. So we'll do +1, right? And we have the same file in a new box, but now with 4 lines. We call this an addition. It's an addition of 1 line into the file, right? Now let's say maybe we want to, subtract 2 lines. So -2. We have the file. Now we have 2 lines, right? Go from 3 lines, add 1 to 4, subtract it to 2. These are all the same file, right? It's just, in our case, maybe a website with the lines of code changing. You're doing a different thing, changing the color. I don't know, whatever it might be, adding a feature, but this is what we call the change in time and the difference of a file. Now that's important. That word difference is what we call each of these, additions or deletions. We call these the diff. It is and represents what happens to our file over time till we get it to its most up-to-date state or stable state, right? Now we look at this change over time and we notice, how do we track it? Well, Git has this notion of a branch. And I like to think of a branch as a line. It's a line that represents the change over time. And at each individual state of the file, we call that a commit. So I'll draw these little dots to represent commits. And commits are just the state of a file as it's changed over time on our branch. So I'll go over here. Well, this is the branch. Now, generally in best practice, we have 1 branch that has what we call our stable code, or the code that we trust to be correct. So if this is a website, this is the code that we trust to be shown to anyone on the internet, right? Or that we say is the most up-to-date. And generally, we call this branch a name. We give it the name and we call it main. It's the main branch, the up-to-date branch, the stable branch, but its name is main. And now let's say we want to add a feature to this website. I don't know, we maybe want to add a new button and it's experimental and it might break. It's a bit dangerous. Git has a notion of branching where we have 1 branch with a set of commits and we want to go and check out a new branch that we can then test our experimental features just in case it might break something so that we can keep the safe and stable code on our main branch. Let's say we have this version of the file, and it has 4 lines. We want to go back to that version. We can. And we can say, let's say we want to add, a feature that adds 5 more lines of code. So we'll do something called branching out. And now we'll make our new file, which has 5 more lines of code. So say +5, and then we'll draw this new file. So from here, since we checked out at the second instance of our file, we had 4 lines, we're adding 5, now we have 9. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 lines, right? And it gets its own commit to on this separate branch. And this branch also gets a name. In this case, we'll call it the feature branch. You can call it whatever you want. Now we have this line, which is our main branch. And at some point, our feature might be ready to come back in. We've worked on it, we've coded on it in isolation, and we might want to merge it back in, right? So that our up-to-date main branch can have this feature included. That is called merging. We can go ahead and merge back in to a commit. Now there are a ton of different strategies to merging, but in this case, like we'll have an example where we have this file, and since it was checked out and we had these 5 additions over time, and still in our main branch, this third file subtracted 2 lines, meaning it only has 2 lines now. And now we have to merge this 2-line file with this 9-line file. Now we would get a 7-line file because we're merging these 2 together. What we call the head of our main branch at time with the head of our feature branch. So now we have a file with 7 lines because we merged these together. Now, it's important to note that Git tracks the changes of these files by their diffs. So we're not creating a new copy of each file over time. We're only saving the additions and deletions over time such that we can get the most up-to-date state or head at the end. Now, all of this happens on your computer, right? None of this is happening in the cloud. So let's say you're, I don't know, on a boat somewhere and you brought your laptop for some reason, and maybe you're in the Caribbean and you have a boat driver and he flips the boat a little too hard and your laptop goes flying and now it's in the water. That sucks, right? Maybe we want to save our code in the cloud, and that's where our awesome provider called GitHub comes in. So GitHub is a repository service in the cloud. Now, I haven't really gone over what the cloud is, but I like to think about it as this place where there is a bunch of servers that are running 24/7 all the time. They're always on, right? And in GitHub, we can store our files safely there, right? Store our code so that it can be safe either for us or it can be public. The way we think about storing this entire system, either on our machine or in the cloud, is through a tool called a repository. So generally, what we would do is we would make a repository in GitHub that would store our code such that we can have our code locally or on our computer, and then also on our repository in GitHub. And to do so, we have to push over this code. The idea is called pushing. So what we can do is we can push, in our case, our main branch over to our repository. I'll just call it R. We have a line, and we're pushing main branch. This says we have a copy of our repository locally, and we have a copy of our repository in the cloud, but our repository in the cloud right now only has our main branch. If we wanted to go ahead and add another feature, we could, and we could push only that feature to the repository as well, and then we could track it there. We could do code reviews there. We could see the differences in the repository and the cloud, but for now, we just keep our main branch. Now, GitHub has a really cool tool called GitHub Pages, and GitHub Pages allow us to have a server that hosts our website such that anyone on the internet can then go and look at our website, maybe like the one we made in last episode for a student's resume, at any time. And it hosts us on a computer that's on 24/7. So if we have a repository that has the code, we can use GitHub Pages to host our website all the time, such that we can see our website, the code, the things that might happen, and view it in real time. So yeah, we've talked about a few things. We've talked about Git on our computer. We've talked about GitHub in the cloud. We've talked a little bit about hosting on a computer that runs all of the time. We've introduced the idea of a cloud. We've gone over some really cool topics. So now we're going to go kick it over to Kurt, who's going to teach us how to host a repository for the project we made in last video so that you can view it in your own GitHub page on the internet.
Well, thank you so much, Alex, for that great explanation on Git version control and how it all interacts with remote hosted repositories in GitHub. We're going to put some of that into practice. Let's create a repository on GitHub. We're going to start here on the dashboard, signed in to our personal account. And we're going to start with, on the left side, on this top repositories list, clicking this new button and taking a look at the options. We have a lot of options here when creating a repository, and we're going to slowly go through each one and talk about what we should put in. We're going to choose ourselves as the owner, and we're going to call this repository Student Portfolio, and because it's a website, we'll call it Website.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good name.
And we're going to describe it as a website for hosting my portfolio and resume. In the description, this is mainly for you. It's kind of just put a little description for what you are creating this repository for. So we're just going to keep it simple. For the first configuration option, we have visibility. And there's two main options for visibility, described pretty neatly here. For public, we can say that anyone on the internet can see this repository, right? They have the URL, they can see it, they can look at your changes, your commits. And then the private option, which is more like invite only, right? This is going to be private, only you have access to it unless you give people a specific invite link. In this case, this is a portfolio. We will probably want other people to see our achievements and our resume and look at our website, so we're going to keep it public.
Yep.
For these next couple options, we have a README. READMEs are pretty important. They usually include a description for other people viewing your repository of what's in there. Maybe some install instructions, maybe it's a description of what you're hosting. We have a README in our files that we're going to upload, so we don't need to include one here. For git ignore, this is for if you have anything that you might not want to upload to a public repository. It could be if you have a password saved on your computer, local environment variables, or anything else that you don't want to be publicly available when people have the link to that repository. We don't have anything like that, so we'll also leave this blank. And for licensing, we don't really want into any liability issues, so what should we put as our licensing?
Yeah, there's a ton of licensing options, but generally a pretty safe bet is the MIT license, which assumes no liability. So if someone runs our code or they build on top of our code in our website and they have issues, it's not our fault. Assume no liability. I think that's probably a pretty safe option.
This is definitely safe. I don't foresee our portfolio causing any issues, but better to be safe than sorry.
Just in case.
Just in case. Now, a new option that's been added here is to jumpstart your project with Copilot. This is pretty cool. If you already have an idea for what you want to build, let's say maybe you're building this portfolio, but you don't have the files created yet. Maybe you could add here to Copilot, create me the bones or the structure for a website to host my resume and my student portfolio. And Copilot will create a pull request, which we'll talk about later, about with all the included files you might need to start that website. In this case, we don't need to use that, but always a great option if you have an idea for what you want to create. So let's create this repository. And GitHub is going to make us a new page where all of our code and all of our files will go.
Cool. So what's going on this page right now? There seems to be like a lot here.
Yeah, so it is a lot. There's a lot to talk about when looking at a repository. We're going to start with the branch concept that Alex mentioned earlier at the Lightboard. Here is where you can see all those different kind of timelines that he was mentioning, right? When you have your main branch, your feature branch, and all those other things. In this case, GitHub has named the default branch master, which will be kind of our stable branch. We can change that later, but for now, that's how GitHub is defaulting it. And is where we could view, if we had feature branches, all of those other feature branches with whatever we might be testing or developing.
Yep.
We're going to look at here, this is how we're going to clone this repository onto our local device so that we can have the local copy, make our changes there, and then push them up to the cloud. And this is where, once we have files, we will see all the files in the repository. Currently, nothing there, but once we push up some code, we'll see it reflected here.
Cool. Yeah. So, I mean, this is like a super cool look at, our repository hosted in the cloud. But maybe now, how do we get those files that we created in episode 2 and add them into the cloud? Or how do we get in our machine?
Exactly. So to get things onto this repository, to push our files, to make commits, we need to download Git, which is a separate software that interacts with GitHub. So we're going to go over to the Git page here, which you can either go directly to this link, git-scm.com, or if you just Google Git for Windows, this will probably be the first result. We're going to navigate from the main page onto the install page. And here we have a bunch of options. We're going to do the Git for Windows 64-bit setup installer, since we have a 64-bit machine. If you have an ARM chip, an ARM CPU, which most people don't need to worry about, but just in case, you would go for the next option. So let's download this 64-bit. And a couple of times, we're going to open it and let the installer run. Now, it's going to ask us a lot of questions for different setup options. We are going to trust that Git knows what's going on, and we're going to take the default in most cases. We're going to install to the folder. We're going to let it, whatever it checks, we trust that that's what we need.
Awesome.
And then here, we're going to override the default branch to main to keep consistent with what we were talking about at the Lightboard, that we use the main branch for our stable and most up-to-date content. And here we go. And kind of just keeping all the defaults. You can really tune your Git to how you would like it if you have kind of more advanced ideas, but we're just going to keep it default. And now we're going to wait for it to install.
Yeah. I feel like by default, everything works for most people on the default install pretty well.
Yeah, it's definitely set up to work for, the majority of circumstances and cases that you would need to, especially for something just like we're making a portfolio website.
Yep. All right, so it looks like our Git install is all done. And we have some, questions. Do we want to launch Git Bash or view release notes? And I think we're okay. So let's just finish. All right. Oh, okay. Well, now, maybe we should go back to our GitHub Copilot app. We should get those local files from our machine to the repository we created. So in our case, I'm just going to restart the app just because we just installed Git. So, we might want to give it a re-update so that the GitHub Copilot app knows about Git. And cool, now we're back in the app. So if we go to our files and we look at where we created the episode 2 resume website earlier, we created it in our documents folder. In our case, there's an episode 2 folder. Let's go and view the website real quick. So if we double click on index, we can see the website and everything that Ashley and Ahmed did for us last episode. You can see the resume embedded. You can see all the experience, projects, etc. But all of this right now is running from our local machine. This file and pointing at our drive, and all of this points to where the file is located on our machine, and it's just rendering the HTML website that we produced last time, right? But now we want to get this on GitHub so we can use GitHub Pages to deploy it. So in the GitHub Copilot app, it's a really great place to open up that repository that we made and then do work within it. So last time we were working out of one of these chat sessions to write some code, but now that we have a repository, let's go work in it. So if we go back to our browser and we go to the GitHub page that Kurt created for us, the repository, and we click on this little green code button, we'll get some options to clone, and clone by SSH, HTTPS, and the CLI. And in our case, we don't really need to know a lot of these. These are a lot of, interesting technical terms, but we can just, try to open this in the GitHub Copilot app and see what happens. So it'll pop up the little button, click open, and see if it opens.
The Copilot app is pretty well wired in to a lot of GitHub features, and you'll find a great user experience of going from the website to the app and the way that the CLI is able to interact between them. So super handy when you're starting off.
Yeah, they did a great job. Yeah, so now if we head back to the GitHub Copilot app, you'll see that there's a little, button that's popped up that says, do we want to clone the repository? And it says, the external GitHub asked if we want to clone it. In our case, we do. Cloning the repository just means taking any and all code that is in the GitHub repository, which right now we have none, we have only a license, and then bringing it down locally to our computer so that we can have it. So let's click allow, clone it, and cool. So now you can see we have this new folder with this repository folder icon where we can now start sessions within this folder. So in these sessions, we are kind of working within that repository so we can branch, we can add commits, we can merge, and we can push out code to the repository. So I think a first good step, let's change our model back to auto, would be, let's go to the local file where we have the website. Let's copy the path. So if we click on this little search bar, copy. Why is that not copying? Sorry, right click and then copy address. Now we can right click. I'll just Control V. We can paste in the path of the local website for us on our computer. So we can say, here is the path for our website on our computer. And then I'll just leave that for there. Can you please push this out to the main branch on GitHub? So let's click enter, send, and it'll start doing its work and push out all of the stuff to GitHub. So we'll give it some time to load.
Yeah, super handy. Instead of having to deal with, in college, people are probably used to taking a class where you might go over Git commands for an entire hour, 2 hours, just over everything. And now with just natural language, you can have the agent do pretty much most of that work for you. So it makes the experience pretty seamless and a lot easier to deal with.
So much better. Yeah, and then we can ask, GitHub Copilot app to teach us about the commands so we can learn more about how Git bash works. So I found the website repository that we want. This is in the one that we're in right now. So we'll just continue through. Awesome. So as you see, we just made a new branch called push site to main, which is probably going to be pushed to our GitHub. So it's not going to update the main branch we have. Awesome. So now you can see we have, well, we're still loading, but we have this little button that's appeared that says create PR. This means create pull request, which allows us to merge our feature branch called push site to main into our main or master branch on the repository. So awesome. It looks like it's done. Maybe Kurt, do you want to go create the PR and check it out from the GitHub website? Show it on the merge.
Let's create this PR. So pull requests are another kind of hallmark of software engineering, especially in a collaborative sense when you're working with other people. What a pull request does, we're going to click this and go over to the website, is it opens up basically kind of a review, right? It's going to show you a snapshot of you have your branch that you want to merge into your stable branch. In this case, it's called what is the branch for this one called? The Frostfire 25 push site to main, and we're trying to push this to the master branch. And in the pull request, we're going to take a look at all the changes present on this feature branch, as it was called earlier, that we want to merge to our stable branch. And you're going to be able to see the diff between all the files, all the new things that are added, and the changes that are going to be done. And when you're collabing with other people, you usually will have other people take a look at the code. It gives you also another chance to look at your own code and say, okay, what was I trying to do? You'll add a description for what the goal of the changes are, and you'll get one more chance to kind of visually inspect the code and make sure that everything looks as you expect.
Yeah, but in our case, we're working within our own website, so everything should be pretty fair.
All right, and we can look from directly in the app at this PR, and we can see here that Copilot has generated a title for us. It's going to add the episode 2 portfolio website content, and it generated also a nice little description for us. Talks about what's changed, the new files we've added, how we're adding some documentation in the README, and we've added the resume PDF, which is an asset that's going to be displayed on our website. So we'll scroll through. We don't have any comments. There's no checks because we don't have any tests. There's no code in it yet. And then we are going to...
Awesome. Maybe we should go to the GitHub website.
Yeah, let's look at it from the GitHub website to make sure that it is all in good. So here's another way to look at it from the actual GitHub website. You can look straight from the pull request tab, or here, whenever you push, it's going to notify you that, hey, there's a branch that had a push, you have a pull request. So let's go take a look at the pull request tab, and we're going to see here that we have that exact same one that GitHub just pushed up, the add episode 2 portfolio website content. Take a look and we can see that same description. We can see that all the new files we added. If we go to the commit, we can see that snapshot that Alex mentioned earlier on the whiteboard as well, where we get the individual diffs of each file. In this case, the diff is everything because we're adding new files, but very handy, especially when you're making smaller changes to an individual file and to individual lines.
Yeah, super awesome to go see, all the code here created.
Yeah. Now, I think our code probably looks pretty good.
Yeah.
If any issues, then we're going to merge this. So click merge. It's a commit message for the actual merge. When you merge a branch into that stable branch, that is also a kind of commit onto that stable branch. So in this case, the commit message is going to be merge pull request 1. The description is the same as for the PR itself, and we're going to confirm this merge.
Looks good to me.
All right, nice. So the pull request has been merged and closed. GitHub will recommend that you delete that feature branch to just clean up old branches and old code and make sure that you have a clean repository to work with. So we'll follow that advice. Okay. We'll get rid of the branch. And let's go back to our code to now see that we have all those files that we just wanted to upload. Oh. So now all of our code is on the repository. We should look at it as a website.
Yeah.
All right. So next thing we can do is take advantage of GitHub Pages, as Alex mentioned. This is a super cool feature offered by GitHub that allows us to publish our portfolio to a website without needing to host it on a website hosting service or paying for any servers or computers to host this content. So we're gonna go to the settings tab up here on this top bar, all the way on the right, and we're gonna navigate down to under the code planning and automation tab, we're gonna look at pages. In pages, we're gonna see the couple settings that we have to set to make sure it's deployed. First, GitHub needs to know from what branch you're deploying from. You normally wanna choose deploy from a branch, or you can talk about GitHub Actions. In this case, we're just going to deploy from a branch. GitHub Actions is an extra feature that if you have tests you want to run before posting or other different tools or anything that you want to run on your code before you push it to a website, that's what a GitHub Action would do. In this case, we don't have those. We're just going to deploy from a branch, and we are going to choose the branch master since that is the one that it got merged into. All right, we're going to save. And once it saves, we're going to refresh and give it some time to post.
Awesome. Yeah. So this is going to host our website so that anyone on the internet can see it.
Exactly.
And it's just as a static website. So just as the files that we've uploaded.
Cool. Yeah. I might need a little second. Refresh it again.
Cool beans. I think there's some really cool configuration options. Like we can give it a domain, change the visibility. Super awesome. So many features in GitHub to make your coding experience way better.
Yeah. Looks like it's taking a second here. There it goes. All right, so it's been posted. We can see that the site is live at Frostfire, our username, .github.io/ and this is the name of the repository, student portfolio website. So let's take a visit. All right, and here is the website that we were viewing earlier on our local files at index.html, now posted on a public website for anyone on the internet to view. It's got all the same files. It's got our resume, our PDF, our project info, now available for the entire World Wide Web. That's pretty nice.
Yeah.
All right.
So I could open up this from my phone, like from like a regular browser tab, and
from your phone, from your iPad, you could, screen share. You can share this on your LinkedIn. You can link this anywhere you want. Yeah,
perfect.
So looking at this now, what if we wanted to make some edits to this website? Let's say maybe we want to add something to the trail journal. We have a project link. We had a to-do that says to add a URL. Let's take a look at maybe adding a new URL to this page. So we're going to go to GitHub and we're going to say, what should the URL be for this website? Let's say we've had it built.
Yeah, maybe why don't we add the project, the repository that we just made, right? Like we just made this repository. Let's add it over into the website.
Oh, that's also a good idea. Let's add the repository link to our website since we've just built it and we're using it to post this. So let's say down at the contact page, maybe we'll put our GitHub repository link down here. So let's say to GitHub, I want to add the link to the GitHub repository that hosts the portfolio down in the contact section of the website. We're on auto still, and let's see what it does. All right, it looks like the agent is finished and it has opened the PR on GitHub. So I'm going to pass the computer back to Alex. We're going to look at the changes, merge them, and then see how they're reflected on the website.
Cool beans. Yeah, let's head back to the GitHub website. We can now go to pull requests since a new one should have been created. And yeah, there we go. Add GitHub repository link to contact section. Cool beans. Let's go look at the files change, see what happened. As you can see, we added some element to now add a button that links us to the page. And, I think this looks good to me, I would say. So let's go submit review. We can. I would say, maybe not submit review. Let's go back to the conversation, scroll down, merge the pull request, done, merge, cool. And now if we go back to the code, you can see that this index.html, which is the file that we just edited, has been updated 2 minutes ago. So that's the commit that we made. Super great. And if you actually look, we can see all of the commits that have been made throughout the timeline of the branch, right? In each one, the code that's been changed if we click into it. Yeah. So cool, let's go back to this hosted website, give it a refresh, see if it's been updated in the GitHub page.
All right. Not
Awesome.
yet.
Has it not been updated? Maybe you got to give it a second.
Yeah.
Oh, yep. So it's currently still running. This is a GitHub action. I apologize. So it says all the checks have passed. We've deployed to the pages and we've built and deployed. Maybe give it one more refresh.
Hopefully it reflects soon.
Awesome.
There it
GitHub
is.
repository. And we're all done. There you go. So yeah, I mean, that's how you make changes to your website. You know, anytime you write code locally and you commit it locally, you can then push it out on its own branch, merge it into your main or master branch using a pull request, and then it'll automatically build and deploy to your personal website.
Well, thank you all so much for joining us today. We've gone over a lot of topics. We've gone over Git, how version control works, how Git and GitHub interact with these remote hosted repositories, and once you've got that code on the remote, how do you publish it to a website using GitHub Pages so that everyone on the internet can see your website.
Yeah, it's been super awesome. All the resources and links will be in the description of this video. And thank you so much for watching, and come join us in our next video where we're going to continue our AI learnings together.